3 months later, Captain Minho Song stood on the bridge of the rescue ship Hope's Promise. Behind him, 11 other human ships followed in formation. They carried medical supplies, emergency shelters, and food for thousands of refugees. How much longer until we reach Vallani space? He asked his navigation officer. 6 hours, sir, came the reply. Dr. Yoonji Kim walked onto the bridge carrying her medical scanner. She was excited to meet the Vallani people and learn how to help them. Captain, I've been studying the biological data Hana provided. Their crystal-based bodies are fascinating. I think we can adapt our medical equipment to help them. Major Hyuk Yoon, the security chief, looked less happy. Sir, I still think we should have brought more weapons. 12 security officers for the whole fleet isn't enough if we run into trouble. Captain Song nodded. Our orders are clear, Major. This is a rescue mission, not a military operation. We get in, load up refugees, and get out. But as they got closer to Vallani space, something felt wrong. The normal radio chatter from trading ships was missing. The space lanes that should have been busy were empty. Captain, the communications officer called out. I'm picking up some strange signals. They're not on any frequency, I know. Put it on speakers, Captain Song ordered. What came through the speakers made everyone on the bridge freeze. It sounded like screaming, but not human. Screaming. It was higher, more musical, like the sound of breaking crystal mixed with terror. Turn it off, Dr. Kim whispered, her face white. But Captain Song held up his hand. Keep listening. We need to understand what we're walking into. The signal kept playing. Sometimes there were other sounds mixed in, rough, harsh voices speaking, in a language none of them recognized. But underneath it all was that terrible crystal screaming that seemed to go on forever. Sir, the communications officer said, his voice shaking. I'm reading multiple sources for these transmissions. They're coming from at least 6 different planets in this system. Major Yoon moved to the weapons console. Captain, I recommend we arm all defensive systems. Do it, Captain Song said. The excitement he had felt about this mission was gone. Now he just wanted to get his people home safely. As they entered the Vallani system, what they saw made no sense at first. The planets were still there, but something was wrong with the light. Instead of the normal glow from Vallani crystal cities, there was a red light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Take us closer to the main planet, Captain Song ordered. What they found there would stay with them for the rest of their lives. The planet's surface was covered with structures that looked like giant cages made of twisted metal. Inside the cages, thousands of Vallani people were trapped. But they weren't just prisoners. They were being tortured. Tech specialist Bomi Seo gasped from her station. Captain, I'm picking up video transmissions. The Korthak are broadcasting. This. Show me, Captain Song said, even though every part of him wanted to look away. The main screen filled with images that made several crew members run from the bridge to be sick. Korthak soldiers who looked like walking tanks made of flesh and metal were systematically breaking pieces off living Vallani people. The crystal beings screamed in harmonies of pain that their translators couldn't handle. But it got worse. Dr. Kim realized what was happening first. They're not killing them, she whispered. They're keeping them alive. They're harvesting their crystal parts while they're still conscious. On the screen, a Korthak soldier held up a piece of crystal that still glowed with life. Other Korthak around him made sounds that the translator said were laughter. Why would they do this, someone asked. Tech specialist Seo had been monitoring other transmissions. Her voice was dead when she answered. Because the crystals are more valuable when harvested from living Vallani. I'm picking up commercial broadcasts. They're selling these pieces as luxury items across the galaxy. Major Yoon had gone very quiet. When he spoke, his voice was ice cold. Sir, request permission to contact the fleet. We need to stop this. Captain Song looked at his orders again. They were clear. Rescue mission only. Negative, Major. We're here to evacuate survivors, not start a war. But as they watched, something happened that broke the last of their restraint. A group of young Vallani, barely more than children, were brought out into view. The Korthak soldiers forced adult Volani to watch as they began the same horrible process on the children. The sounds that came through the speakers then weren't just screaming. They were the sound of parents watching their children being tortured to death, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Dr. Kim fell to her knees. Several other crew members were crying openly. Major Yoon had his hand on his weapon, and his whole body was shaking with rage. "Sir," the communications officer said, his voice breaking. "I'm getting a signal from the surface. It's Hana." "Put her through." Hana's voice came through the speakers, but it was different now. Before, she had sounded like music. Now she sounded like broken glass. "Human ships, please help us. They are killing the children. Please, you have weapons. Stop them." "Captain," Song closed his eyes. "Hana, we're here to evacuate survivors. How many of your people can we save?" "There are maybe 300 left alive," she said. "But Captain, you don't understand. They're not going to let us leave. This is entertainment for them. They want us to hope before they kill us too." As if to prove her point, several Korthak warships appeared on their sensors. They were moving to surround the human fleet. "Captain," the tactical officer called out, "Korthak ships are targeting us. They're demanding we leave or be destroyed." But then something else came through on the communications channel. One of the Korthak was speaking in broken human language. "Human ships, you watch now. We show you what happens to those who help crystal singers. Watch and learn." On the screen, they brought out a group of Volani that included children who couldn't have been more than a few years old. The Korthak commander looked directly into the camera as he raised a device that would shatter the crystal children slowly, piece by piece. "No!" Dr. Kim screamed. Major Yoon lost control. "Sir, I'm taking a shuttle down there. Court-martial me later." But Captain Song was already moving. "All ships, this is Song. Begin immediate evacuation of all survivors, and arm every weapon we have." "Sir, our orders," someone started to say. "Our orders didn't include watching. Children be tortured for entertainment," Captain Song snapped. "We're going to save who we can, and then we're going home. And we're taking every second of this with us." Tech specialist SEO was already working. "Recording everything, sir. Multiple backups." The next 2 hours were the longest of their lives. They managed to save 347 Volani people, including Hana. But they had to watch as thousands more were killed in ways that no living being should ever experience. When they finally left Volani space, their ships were full of traumatized refugees and crew members who would never be the same. Hana sat in the medical bay, no longer able to make the beautiful sounds her people were known for. The torture had damaged something inside her that might never heal. Captain Song looked at the recordings they had made. Hours of evidence showing horrors that most people couldn't even imagine. "Send a priority message to Director Nam," he told his communications officer. "Tell him we're coming home, and we're bringing proof of what's really happening out here." As their ships jumped to hyperspace, none of them knew that they were carrying something else home with them. They were carrying the spark that would light a fire in humanity that would burn across the galaxy. Because there are some things that, once seen, cannot be ignored. And there are some wrongs that demand more than just rescue missions, they demand justice. The morning sky above New Busan looked the same as any other day. Purple clouds drifted across the alien sun, and the city below hummed with the sounds of everyday life. Workers headed to the shipyards. Children ran to school. Nobody knew that. This ordinary Tuesday would change everything. Taemin Park sat in his small office at the Human Colonial Administration building. He was a linguist, someone who studied alien languages. Most days, he helped translate trade deals or tourism guides. It was quiet work, and he liked it that way. The emergency alarm made him jump. The sound echoed through the building, followed by Director Jinwoo Nam's voice over the speakers. "All department heads to Conference Room A. Priority 1. This is not a drill." Taemin had never heard Priority 1 called before. He grabbed his translation tablet and hurried down the hall. Other staff members looked just as confused as he felt. In the conference room, Director Nam stood next to something that made everyone stop and stare. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. The alien was tall, maybe 7 feet, and seemed to be made of living crystal. Light moved through her body like water, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. "This is Hana," Director Nam said. "She's from the Villani people. She came here in a small ship that barely made it through our security. She says her people need our help." The crystal being named Hana made a sound like wind chimes mixed with a singing voice. It was the most beautiful thing Taman had ever heard. Then his translation tablet started working, and the beauty turned to horror. "Please," the device said, in a flat computer voice. "My people are dying. They are killing us all. We have nowhere else to go." Taman looked at the others in the room. Admiral Somin Lee sat straight in her chair, her military training showing. Counselor Daehyun Choi had gone pale. Economic advisor Seul-gi Han was already taking notes. "Tell us what happened," Director Nam said gently. Hana's crystal body seemed to dim. The light inside her moved slower, sadder. "The Korthak Empire came to our world 6 months ago. At first they said they wanted to trade. We are peaceful people. We welcomed them." She paused, and the sound she made was like breaking glass. "Then they started taking our people. They said we were now part of their empire. When we refused to fight for them, they began destroying our cities." The translator kept working as Hana continued. "They break our crystal homes with their machines. They take our children and put them in cages. They make us watch as they destroy everything we've built over thousands of years." Admiral Lee leaned forward. "How many of your people are left? On my homeworld, maybe 1 million. We used to be 20 million. The other worlds..." Hana's voice became too quiet for the translator to pick up. "What about your military?" Admiral Lee asked. "Can't you fight back?" Hana made a sound like sad music. "We are not fighters. We build beautiful things and sing to the stars. We have never made weapons. We don't know how." Counselor Choi spoke up. "What about the Galactic Council? Surely they can help." "We went to them first," Hana said. "They told us it was a territorial dispute. They said they could not interfere. But this is not about territory. This is about survival." Director Nam walked to the window and looked out at the city. "What exactly are you asking us to do?" Hana's body grew brighter. "We know humans have good ships, fast ships. We ask only for help to escape. Take our people to safety before there are none left to save." "And in return?" Economic advisor Han asked. Hana was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke in a whisper. "We will give you the location of our sacred resonance vaults. They contain crystal technology that could power your cities for 1,000 years. All we ask is for our lives." The room went silent. Everyone knew what crystal technology meant. It could change everything for humanity. But the cost seemed too high. Taman found himself speaking without thinking. "Show us what they did to your people." Hana looked at him, and even through the crystal, he could see sadness. She touched her body, and suddenly the room filled with images. Holographic pictures appeared in the air, showing crystal cities being smashed by large machines. Villani people running in fear, children crying sounds, like broken bells. But Taman noticed something. The images were bad, but they didn't show the worst parts. He could tell from Hana's body language that she was holding something back. The way she dimmed when certain pictures appeared. The way she quickly moved past some scenes. "Why aren't you showing us everything?" he asked. Hana went completely dark for a moment. "Because if you see it all, you will say no. You will say it is too dangerous to help us. You will say it is not your problem." Admiral Lee stood up. "We should send ships immediately. This is clearly a humanitarian crisis." "Wait," Counselor Choi said. "We need to think about this. If we interfere with Korthak business, they might attack us too. Are we ready for war?" "This isn't about war," Admiral Lee shot back. "This is about saving innocent people." Economic advisor Han looked at her notes. "The crystal technology alone would be worth the risk. But we need to know more about the Korthak military strength." Director Nam held up his hand for silence. "We'll put it to a vote. All in favor of sending evacuation ships to help the Villani?" Hands went up around the room. Admiral Lee voted yes immediately. After a moment, so did Taman and 2 others. Counselor Choi and Economic Advisor Han voted yes, but slowly. Motion passes, Director Nam said. We'll send a humanitarian fleet within 3 months. Hana's body lit up like a star. The sound she made was pure joy, like 1,000 beautiful songs at once. Thank you. Thank you. You are saving my people. But as the meeting ended and people started to leave, Taman stayed behind. He watched Hana carefully. Something in her posture told him she was still afraid, still hiding something. Hana, he said quietly, what aren't you telling us? She looked at him for a long time. You humans are good people. You want to help, but if you knew what the Korthak really do to us, you would not just send evacuation ships, you would send warships. And then you would die fighting them, and my people would still be gone. What do they really do? Hana went dark again. Things that have no words, not in your language, not in any language. As she left the room, Taman felt a cold fear in his stomach. He had the feeling that humanity was about to learn something terrible about the galaxy they lived in, something that would change everything. But for now, they would send evacuation ships. They would try to save who they could. It seemed like the right thing to do. If only they knew what was waiting for them in Volani space. The rescue fleet returned to New Busan 3 weeks later. Director Jinwoo Nam stood in the docking bay watching as stretcher after stretcher of broken Volani people was carried out. Many of the human crew members looked just as damaged as the refugees they had saved. Captain Song approached the director with a sealed data case. His hands shook as he held it out. Sir, you need to see what we recorded. But I have to warn you, once you watch this, you can't unknown it. Director Nam took the case. How bad is it, Captain? Worse than anything in our history books, sir. And the galaxy has been allowing it to happen for years. In the secure conference room, Director Nam gathered his senior staff. Admiral Soman, Lee Counselor Daehyun Choi, Economic Advisor Sul-gi Han, and Ambassador Taejin Woo, who had just returned from the Galactic Council capital. Before we review Captain Song's recordings, Director Nam said, Ambassador Woo has some information from the Council. Ambassador Woo looked sick. Director, what I learned at the capital changes everything. The Galactic Council didn't just ignore the Volani situation. They've been profiting from it. He activated a holographic display showing trade records. These are official Council trade documents. For the past 50 years, harmonic crystal fragments have been one of the most expensive luxury items in the galaxy. They're sold as decorative pieces, meditation aids, even jewelry. Admiral Lee studied the data. What are harmonic crystal fragments? Pieces of tortured Volani people, Ambassador Wu said quietly. The Council members have been buying and selling parts of sentient beings for decades. They just didn't know what they were. Economic Advisor Han went pale. How much money are we talking about? Trillions of credits. Some Council members have entire collections. The Korthak Empire has built their entire economy around this trade. Counselor Choi stood up suddenly. Are you telling me the galaxy's government has been buying pieces of murdered people as art? Not murdered, Captain Song said from the corner. Tortured. They keep them alive as long as possible. Dead crystals don't sing properly. Director Nam opened the data case. Let's see what we're really dealing with. The recordings played for 2 hours. Partway through, Economic Advisor Han had to leave the room. Admiral Lee watched it all with growing fury. By the end, even Ambassador Wu, who had seen many terrible things in his diplomatic career, was shaking. Shut it off. Director Nam finally said, I've seen enough. The room was silent for a long time. Then Admiral Lee spoke in a voice like cold steel. Sir, I formally request permission to mobilize the fleet. To do what? Counselor Choi asked. Start a war we can't win? To end this, Admiral Lee said simply. To make sure it never happens again. Director Nam looked around the room. The Galactic Council will never allow military action. They'll cut off all trade with human colonies. We'll be isolated. Economic Advisor Han, who had returned to the room, spoke up. "Sir, I've been running numbers. If we lose galactic trade, some of our outer colonies will face serious problems. Food shortages, medical supply issues. How many people are we talking about?" Director Nam asked. "Maybe 50,000 humans in real danger if trade stops." Admiral Lee slammed her hand on the table. 50,000? We just watched evidence of 20 billion Volani people being tortured to death. And that's just one species. Ambassador Wu cleared his throat. "There's something else. I did some research at the Council archives. The Korthak Empire has done this before. 3 other species have been completely wiped out in the same way over the past 200 years. The Council classified those as territorial disputes too. So this is going to keep happening," Director Nam said. "Unless someone stops it," Admiral Lee replied. That evening, Director Nam called a special session of the Human Colonial Council. Representatives from all human worlds joined the meeting by video link. "I'm going to show you something," Director Nam began. "I'm not going to warn you about what you'll see because warnings don't help. You need to see what our galaxy really is." He played edited highlights from Captain Song's recordings. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Representatives started shouting, some demanded immediate action, others called for military mobilization. News anchor Chae-Young Lim was the first to break the story to the public. Her evening broadcast started normally, then she began showing the images. Halfway through her report, she started crying on live television. "I'm sorry," she said to the camera. I can't keep reading this. How do we live in a galaxy where this happens? How do we just go on with our normal lives after seeing this?" Within hours, every human world was in chaos. Citizens' rights. Leader Donghae Park organized the largest protests in human history. Millions of people took to the streets with signs reading, "Never again means never again," and "Justice for the Villani." Tech specialist Bomi Seo had accidentally leaked portions of the recordings to every major news network. The images spread across human space faster than any government could stop them. But the real shock came when Ambassador Wu revealed the Council trade records. When people learned that the galaxy's leaders had been buying and selling torture victims as luxury goods, the protests turned to something darker. On New Sol, protesters surrounded the Galactic Council trade office and refused to let anyone enter or leave. On Mars Colony, human workers at the Galactic Shipping Center went on strike. Across human space, any business connected to the Galactic Council found itself blockaded by angry crowds. Director Nam found himself facing an impossible choice. The Galactic Council had sent an ultimatum: stop the protests and return to normal trade relations, or face complete economic isolation. "We can't fight the entire galaxy," Councillor Choi argued in an emergency meeting. "We're one species out of hundreds. If we try to take on the Council, they'll crush us." But Admiral Lee had been having private meetings with her military advisors. "Sir, what if I told you we wouldn't be fighting the entire galaxy? What if I told you we could remove the Korthak Empire from existence without the Council being able to stop us?" Director Nam stared at her. "How?" "We've been keeping some things secret since we joined the galactic community," Admiral Lee said carefully. "Technologies that we thought we might need someday. Military capabilities that we hoped we'd never have to use." She activated a secure, holographic display. "We've been building these in secret for 40 years, just in case." What she showed them made everyone in the room go silent. Ship designs unlike anything in the galactic fleet. Weapons that broke every convention of space warfare. Technologies that other species had never even imagined. "You're talking about genocide," Councillor Choi whispered. "No," Admiral Lee said, firmly. "I'm talking about justice. Genocide is what the Korthak do to helpless people. This would be removing a cancer from the galaxy." Economic Advisor Han looked at the weapon specifications. "If we do this, there's no going back. The galaxy will never see us the same way again." "Good," Director Nam said quietly. "Because I don't want to live in a galaxy that allows what we saw in those recordings." He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, protests continued. Humans, demanding action, demanding justice for people they had never met but could not forget. "Admiral Lee, how long would you need to prepare?" "6 months for full mobilization, sir." "And the Galactic Council?" Ambassador Wu checked his diplomatic communications. "They're getting nervous. The protests are affecting trade across the galaxy. They're demanding we restore order immediately." Director Nam made his decision. "Admiral, begin preparations immediately, full secrecy. As far as the galaxy knows, we're building defensive systems to protect ourselves after the Council's threats." "And if they try to stop us?" Admiral Lee asked. "Then they'll learn the same lesson the Korthak Empire is about to learn," Director Nam said. "Humanity tried to be peaceful. We tried to work within their system, but their system is broken, and some things are more important than keeping the peace." Outside, Hana sat in the refugee medical center, slowly recovering from her trauma. Her crystal body was healing, but she would never again be able to make the beautiful sounds her people were known for. She didn't know that across human space, millions of people were demanding justice for her and her people. She didn't know that the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen was being prepared for war. All she knew was that for the first time since the Korthak came to her world, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. 6 months after the Villani recordings reached human space, something was happening in the quiet systems far from galactic trade routes. Hidden shipyards that had been dormant for decades suddenly came alive with activity. Chief Engineer Youngjae Beck stood in the main construction bay of Facility 7, watching as the final pieces of humanity's largest warship came together. The ship was called Soul's Vengeance, and it was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Status report," Admiral Soman Lee said as she walked onto the observation deck. "Final systems testing complete, Admiral," Engineer Beck replied. "All weapon systems operational, stealth systems at full capacity. She's ready for war." Through the transparent aluminum windows, they could see dozens of other ships taking shape. Each one was a masterpiece of human engineering, built with technologies that humanity had developed in secret over decades of galactic membership. The galaxy thought humans were good traders and decent engineers. They had no idea what humans could build when they put their minds to war. "How many ships do we have ready?" Admiral Lee asked. 237 combat vessels, Engineer Bayek said, checking his tablet. "Plus support ships, supply vessels, and the special operation craft. Fleet Admiral Ji-Hoon Kang estimates we'll have complete strategic superiority within the first week of operations." Admiral Lee nodded. The fleet was smaller than the Korthak Empire's forces, but it was built for a different kind of war. Humanity had learned lessons from their own violent history that other species had never needed to learn. They knew how to fight dirty. Intelligence Officer Nayeon Ju approached with her daily briefing. "Admiral, our surveillance of Korthak space is complete. We have detailed maps of every military installation, every torture facility, every world in their empire." "And the Galactic Council?" "Still completely unaware of our preparations. As far as they know, we're building defensive systems to protect our colonies from future threats. Ambassador Wu has been very convincing in his role as the concerned diplomat." Admiral Lee smiled coldly. Ambassador Wu had spent months at council meetings, acting like a frightened human representative worried about protecting his people. He had even asked for advice on building defensive platforms, letting council members believe they were helping humanity prepare to turtle up and hide. None of them suspected that humanity was preparing to project force across the galaxy. "What about the special weapons?" Admiral Lee asked. Intelligence Officer Ju hesitated. "Admiral, are you sure we want to use those? Some of the things our scientists have developed, they're beyond anything the galaxy considers acceptable warfare." "Show me." They walked to a secure section of the facility where Dr. Min-Soo Park was overseeing final testing of humanity's most classified weapon systems. What they found there would have horrified the Galactic Council if they had known it existed. "Admiral," Dr. Park said, not looking up from his work, "the nanoplague delivery systems are ready. We can target specific genetic markers with 100% accuracy. We could wipe out every Korthak in the galaxy and leave every other species completely unharmed." And the psychological warfare systems? Also ready. We've studied Korthak, brain patterns from the intelligence we gathered. We know exactly what frequencies will cause them maximum terror. We can broadcast fear directly into their minds. Admiral Lee looked at the weapons that could end entire species with the push of a button. Doctor, what does it say about us that we can build these things? Dr. Park finally looked up. It says we learned from our own history, Admiral. We know what evil looks like because we've seen it in ourselves. The difference is that we've chosen to use that knowledge to protect others instead of destroy them. Across human space, similar preparations were taking place. On Mars colony, Captain Minho Song was training his crew on the new assault carrier New Busan Remembers. The ship was designed specifically for close-range combat with Korthak vessels. Remember, Captain Song told his officers, we're not just fighting to win. We're fighting to make sure this never happens again. Every Korthak installation we destroy is one less place where innocent people can be tortured. His crew nodded grimly. Many of them had been on the original rescue mission. They had seen the recordings. They understood exactly what they were. Fighting for on Europa Station, Fleet Admiral Kang was reviewing the final battle plans with his strategic team. The holographic display showed the entire Korthak Empire, with red markers indicating priority targets. Phase 1, Admiral Kang explained. We hit their military infrastructure simultaneously across 12 worlds. No warnings, no mercy. We want their entire fleet disabled within the first 6 hours. Phase 2, we target the torture facilities. Every single one. We save who we can and document everything we find. Phase 3, we eliminate their capacity to ever do this again. Government centers, military academies, weapons factories, everything that makes the Korthak Empire possible. What about civilians? One of his officers asked. We avoid civilian casualties where possible, Admiral Kang said. But remember, Korthak, civilians have been buying torture victims as luxury goods for decades. Their entire society is built on the suffering of others. At the same time, Ambassador Wu was attending what would be his final Galactic Council session. Council Chairman Vorthak was discussing trade regulations when Wu asked to address the assembly. Honored council members, Wu said, standing at the human representative podium. I want to thank you for your patience with humanity during our recent difficulties. Several council members nodded politely. They thought Wu was going to announce that humanity was backing down from their protests and returning to normal trade relations. I also want to inform you that in exactly 72 hours, the human military will begin operations to remove the Korthak Empire from existence. The council chamber went completely silent. Ambassador Wu, Chairman Vorthak said slowly, surely you misspoke. Humanity doesn't have the military capacity for such actions. Wu smiled. We've been keeping some things secret, Chairman. You see, we learned something important from our own history. Sometimes evil must be met with overwhelming force. Sometimes, the only way to stop a monster is to become something more terrifying than the monster. He activated a holographic display that showed real-time images of the human war fleet, 237 warships that the Council had never seen before, armed with weapons that broke every galactic convention. This is impossible, one council member whispered. You taught us that the galaxy rewards strength and punishes weakness, Wu continued. You showed us that peaceful species get tortured to death while predators prosper. Well, we're about to show you what happens when the most successful predator species in galactic history decides to protect the innocent. Chairman Vorthak stood up angrily. The Council forbids this action. Any attack on Korthak territory will result in immediate economic sanctions and military intervention. Wu laughed. Military intervention? With what? You've been buying your luxury goods from the Korthak for so long that you've forgotten how to fight. And economic sanctions? We've been preparing for galactic isolation for months. He started walking toward the exit. Oh, and Chairman, you might want to check your personal collection of harmonic crystal fragments. Each one represents a Villani person who was tortured to death for your entertainment. Sweet dreams. As Ambassador Wu left the council chamber, alarms started going off across Korthak space. Human ships were appearing on sensors in 12 different systems simultaneously. The Korthak military tried to respond, but they discovered something terrifying. The humans had been watching them for months. Every ship movement, every communication, every defensive strategy had been monitored and countered before the war even began. Korthak Admiral Grenth sent out desperate calls for help, but his messages were being jammed by human electronic warfare systems. Worse, the human ships seemed to appear and disappear at will, striking targets with devastating precision before vanishing into space. How is this possible? Admiral Grenth demanded of his tactical officer. Humans are traitors. They don't have this technology. But on the bridge of Sol's Vengeance, Fleet Admiral Kang was proving that humans had learned very different lessons from their history than other species expected. Target their command ships first, he ordered. I want their entire fleet command structure eliminated within the hour. Around him, his officers worked with cold efficiency. This wasn't just war. This was the systematic dismantling of everything that made the Korthak Empire possible. And they were just getting started. The human war fleet struck like lightning across 12 Korthak worlds at exactly the same moment. Fleet Admiral Jihoon Kang watched from the bridge of Sol's Vengeance as his carefully planned attack began. All ships report ready, his communications officer announced. Begin Operation Resonance, Admiral Kang ordered. What happened next would be remembered as the fastest military campaign in galactic history. Within 6 hours, the entire Korthak fleet was either destroyed or floating dead in space. Their ships, built for terrorizing helpless victims, were no match for human vessels designed for real war. Captain Song's assault carrier, New Busan, remembers, led the attack on the main Korthak torture facility. What his Marines found there was worse than the recordings had shown. Thousands of Vellani people and members of other species were being kept alive in conditions that had no name. Get medical teams down here now, Captain Song ordered into his and bring every recording device we have. The galaxy needs to see this. War Crimes Tribunal officer Soyeon Park followed the Marines into the facility with her documentation team. What she found would provide evidence for trials that would reshape galactic law forever. Captain, she called out, her voice shaking. They have records. The Korthak kept detailed files on every person they tortured. Names, species, how long they kept them alive. They treated it like a business. In the deepest levels of the facility, they found something that made even the hardened Marines stop in shock. A storage room filled with crystal fragments, each one tagged with information about the Vellani person it came from. Age, gender, how much pain they had endured before that piece was harvested. There are thousands of them, Dr. Kim whispered, as she examined the storage units. Each fragment represents someone's child, someone's parent. Captain Song activated his fleet communicator. Admiral Kang, you need to see this. We're transmitting everything we find to the documentation center. Across Korthak space, similar discoveries were being made on every world. The torture industry was even bigger than anyone had imagined. The Korthak had been systematically destroying species for centuries, and they had kept records of everything. But the Korthak weren't giving up without a fight. Warlord Grenth gathered the survivors of his fleet and tried to make a final stand at their homeworld. Human ships, he broadcast on all frequencies. You are making a mistake. The Galactic Council will never allow you to destroy us. We have powerful friends across the galaxy. Admiral Kang's response was broadcast back on the same frequencies, but this time it went to every world in the galaxy. Warlord Grenth, Admiral Kang said calmly. Let me explain something to you. We don't care about the Galactic Council. We don't care about your friends. We care about justice. And justice demands that your empire stops existing. The final battle lasted less than 2 hours. Korthak ships that had spent decades terrorizing helpless victims found themselves facing human vessels that had been built specifically to kill them. The outcome was never in doubt. But Admiral Kang didn't just want to win the war. He wanted to make sure it never happened again. Deploy the special weapons, he ordered. Across the Korthak homeworld, human ships began releasing nanotechnology that would seek out and destroy anything more advanced than basic tools. Every computer, every weapon, Every piece of technology that could be used to build spaceships was systematically eliminated. The Korthak people were left alive, but they were stripped of the ability to ever leave their world again. They would have to rebuild their entire civilization from the ground up, and human monitoring stations would make sure they never developed spaceflight again. Meanwhile, at the Galactic Council capital, Chairman Vorthak was discovering that the rest of the galaxy wasn't as upset about the Korthak destruction as he had expected. "You can't just ignore this," he shouted at the emergency session. "Humanity has destroyed an entire empire without council approval." But Ambassador Wu was there with evidence that changed everything. He had brought detailed records of every luxury item the council members had bought from the Korthak over the decades. "Council member Zethrix," Ambassador Wu said, reading from his files. "In the past 5 years, you purchased 47 harmonic crystal fragments for your private collection. Would you like to know the names of the Villani children those pieces came from?" The chamber went silent. "Council member Vorthak," he continued, "your meditation chamber is decorated with crystals harvested from a Villani family unit. The parents were kept alive for 6 months while pieces were slowly removed. Their children were forced to watch." One by one, Ambassador Wu read the names and stories of the beings whose fragments had been sold as luxury goods. By the time he finished, several council members had left the chamber and others were openly weeping. The human military action wasn't an attack on innocent people, Ambassador Wu concluded. It was the removal of a cancer that had been growing in our galaxy for centuries, and everyone in this room helped feed that cancer with your money. The vote was unanimous. The Galactic Council officially recognized the human action as a justified intervention. They also passed new laws making the trade in sentient being parts punishable by complete economic isolation. But humanity wasn't finished. Admiral Lee stood before the Human Colonial Council 6 months after the war ended. Behind her were holographic displays showing 43 different species that had been victims of similar atrocities across the galaxy. "We've received requests for protection from dozens of civilizations," she reported. "Species that have been living in fear of stronger neighbors who might decide to exploit them." Director Nam nodded. "What do you recommend, Admiral?" "We established the Villani protocols," Admiral Lee said. "Any species that commits systematic atrocities against helpless populations will face the same fate as the Korthak Empire. Not conquest, not occupation, but complete removal from galactic civilization." "And if the Galactic Council objects?" Admiral Lee smiled grimly. "Sir, 3 more species have surrendered their weapons and disbanded their militaries rather than risk human intervention. The galaxy is learning that there are consequences for evil now." On the new Villani homeworld, Hana sat in a crystal garden that had been grown from fragments recovered from Korthak storage facilities. Each crystal represented someone who had died, but they were no longer silent. The fragments had been incorporated into a memorial that sang constantly, remembering the voices that had been lost. Taemin Park, the linguist who had first translated her plea for help, sat beside her. "How do you feel about what happened to the Korthak?" he asked. Hana's voice was still damaged, but she had learned to speak in new ways. "I feel satisfied," she said carefully. "Not happy, because happiness cannot bring back the dead, but satisfied that justice was served." "Do you think we went too far?" Hana looked at him with her crystal eyes that had seen the worst the galaxy could offer. "Human Taemin, your people did something that no other species in galactic history has done. You saw evil and you stopped it, even though it cost you greatly. You asked for nothing in return except that it never happen again." She gestured toward the memorial crystals around them. "These voices sing because of your courage. Children across the galaxy sleep safely because you chose to act instead of looking away. The galaxy will never see humanity the same way again," Taemin said. "Good," Hana replied. "Before they saw you as harmless traitors. Now they know you are guardians. They know that somewhere in the darkness, humanity is watching, and that evil will not be tolerated." As the sun set over the new Villani world, the memorial crystals sang their song of remembrance. It was a song of loss and sorrow, but also of hope. because for the first time in galactic history, the innocent had protectors who were willing to do whatever was necessary to keep them safe. The galaxy had learned a new truth. Humanity had tried to be peaceful. They had tried to work within the system. But when faced with absolute evil, they had chosen justice over diplomacy, action over words, and protection of the innocent over maintaining the status quo. And they had made it clear that they would make that choice again, as many times as necessary. The age of unopposed predators was over. The age of human guardianship had begun. In the darkness between stars, human ships patrolled silently, watching for the next species that might mistake mercy for weakness. They carried a simple message for any who would listen. The innocent are under our protection now. Choose accordingly.